about the specifics of how to take a look at a resume or an application, how to find gaps in the resume, how to ask and probe for questions. There's a skill level involved in interviewing where you really need to be listening very well to the person and hear exactly what they're saying. And when they go to say things like, well, we did this or we did that, you know, maybe they were on a committee. Well, we know about the 80-20 rule, right? You know,
only you do.
Exactly, and that's exactly what you do is you probe the person for what exactly did you do? What did you say? How did you act? What was your behavior? Because there are several types of interviewing questions that you can ask. The one that I recommend most is be behavioral based, because the past is a good predictor of the future. It's not to say that people cannot change, but when you ask 2 or 3 or 4 different kinds of questions related to a particular skill set that the person needs, then they need to be able to demonstrate that they have that behavior. And so when you're listening, as I mentioned earlier, you need to hear the I did, I said, and understand that they're just not telling you what they would do, which would be hypothetical.
Actually telling about experiences they've had in the past and behaviors from the past, correct?
That's always very important.
Well, that's a good tip for both the businesses and the employees that are trying to get hired to remember that one. Another thing that's a scary thing is investigations.
Yes.
We always hope we don't have to do this, but again, it's one of those things that comes along, and if you don't have a full-time HR person that's well-versed in this, all small business owners really need to be aware of this. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, I have had a lot of experience with both investigations in a large corporation as well as small organizations, and I've come in to situations where the person before me didn't do such a thorough job, and I had to come in and clean up the mess, perhaps from the EEOC or Human Rights, who have said, you know, you constructively discharged this person, or because of sexual harassment, you have forced the person to leave. So you have a couple different challenges. And so it is important to take every single complaint seriously, and we talk about that in the program, as well as talking about what would the steps be to go through and document a very thorough investigation where you can show, if you're ever challenged, that you went through your due diligence and
you did what you could,
did everything you could, because so many people sort of tend to shove it under the rug. Things like that are not really spoke about in workplace, and it's hard to have the conversation, you know, because you really have to confront. I mean, I just tell you, when I was younger, starting to do these investigations, I certainly learned a lot more about sexual harassment than I ever imagined. And it is increasingly a problem, and so you really do need to educate and know how to do it right, and know what to document and what not to document.
Sounds good. Another thing is we always hear about doing audits for our financials situations and auditing our financials. But one thing you talk about is doing an HR audit.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, I do, particularly with businesses who are just starting up, or businesses who are being taken over by perhaps a new next generation or another company. I will come in and do an HR audit, and that basically entails going through their posters, taking a look at their bulletin boards, taking a look at their personnel files to make sure that they don't have things that are in the personnel file that are not appropriate or could be potentially even against the law, and going into more of the how do you manage people. And I have some very specific questions that I recommend. And so all of these courses, what I do try to do is, I recommend that every employer should always go to an employment law update with the employment law attorneys, and they're very good. There's some good ones here in town. But the problem is you don't always get to the how-to. And so in our seminars that we're partnering with the chamber is that we try to get down to the how-to. And we bring in copies of forms. We bring in copies of policies. We bring in things, models that they can use and steps that they can take. And even in some cases, when we have enough time, we actually use some real life experiences or cases that they have, the participants, in their actual job, and then they can go back and just apply it immediately.
Yeah, so then it makes it very applicable to work. We like that.
Absolutely.
You've talked a lot about a variety of changes that take place in the HR world, and one of those areas is the Family Medical Leave Act. I know you said there's changes there a lot, and you've talked to a lot of businesses about those at workshops. Mm-hmm. What type of information is covered in that?
In the Family Medical Leave Act program, we actually gave an update earlier this year about the changes that came about regarding the amendment that was effective in January. And in that particular program, there were a lot of changes. That act was put into place in 1993 and has not been amended since in a big way like they had this year. And that there were a lot of forms, policies, and procedures that needed to be changed. And in particular, there are even some things under the new Family Medical Leave Act that has nothing to do with medical.
Surprise!
To be honest, I mean, it's like, you know, it has to do with the military leave and the spouses of a military person. And that would be a complete surprise to most employers, because you think family medical leave has to do with medical, but that's not the case.
Broader even.
Exactly.
I know one thing that's important you've mentioned is continuing education, and these workshops also now can carry some certification with it. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes. Rogers HR Consulting just this year became a pre-approved provider, which is this certification here. And what the pre-approved provider indicates is that the person and the company is experienced and has the knowledge to be able to then train those that are seeking that HR knowledge body. There's a specific HR body of knowledge that you must abide to and cover, as well as there are some specific requirements that you have to do. You have to do evaluations, you have to do some pre-communication, things like that, and you also have to submit the information to HRCI, which HRCI is the Human Resources Certification Institute. And they are the people that will certify, just like an accountant would be certified as a CPA, a certified public accountant. Well, there are 3 different HR certifications one would be able to get, and that would be a PHR, Professional and Human Resources, an SPHR, which is what I am right now, or a GPHR, which is what I'm studying for.
Lots of studies.
And to be honest, I had a friend who was an employment law attorney, and he took the Illinois bar exam, and he said he took the SPHR with me, and he said the SPHR was just as hard as the Illinois bar exam, he felt.
Yeah.
And it was over 400 questions, and you actually have to take 30 credit hours of coursework every 3 years to maintain this certification, which is why people would take a certified HRCI pre-approved class, and in our case, they only are charged $20 to $40, which is really cheap for a 3-hour program.
That really is great. So again, that continuing education is so important, and it's so great that you can get it right here locally in Springfield. You don't have to travel out of town. It's done locally by local people, and so that really is a great way to expand. But again, you don't have to be a human resource professional.
And you don't